The coaching wheel is starting to turn. Did the Giants just land their next Super Bowl winning head coach? Plus, divisional weekend is right around the corner. We've got in-depth previews for each game here on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Hello and welcome once again to the Grey Duck NFL Show. I am your host, Josh Kolajeski, and we've got a lot to dive into today, both news-related and, of course, the divisional playoffs that start this weekend. But the biggest news of the week since we last spoke is that John Harbaugh, the former head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, is now going to be the head coach of the New York Giants. It was first reported 2 days ago, and 2 days before we are recording this, which is on Friday, January 16th. So back on Wednesday is when it was originally reported that Harbaugh would take that job. They are still finalizing the last details in that contract as of the time that we were recording it, but that should be final and announced by the team soon, unless something completely unexpected happens. So John Harbaugh is your head coach. It's already been reported that the assumption is that if Todd Monken does not land any head coaching jobs, that he will join John Harbaugh from Baltimore. They were the head coach and offensive coordinator, of course, with the Ravens over the last couple of years, and Monken would come as part of a package deal to New York. So you've got one of the better and one of the previously longest tenured head coaches in the NFL coming to the Big Apple. This is a bit different from what I had surmised in our show last week when we talked about my opinions for the best fits for each team. And I had said, well, Chris Shula, because I think you want somebody that can maximize the defense, and you also want somebody that has a big name. And of course, Shula having the Don Shula name, being a grandson of Don Shula, fit that bill a little bit. But so does John Harbaugh, of course. You've got John Harbaugh, a guy, proven commodity, has equity, and head coaching and Super Bowl experience coming in and taking over. And if you're talking about like different archetypes of head coaches where you've got the offensive strategist, the defensive strategist, the CEO, all of those archetypes, I would think that John Harbaugh falls most in line with that CEO archetype. Obviously, his brother was a professional quarterback, so he's got offensive knowledge there. He's run one of the best defenses of the 2010s and late 2000s in Baltimore, so he's got the knowledge there. But mostly he's a guy that's going to provide good leadership, and you hope hire good offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and really know who to put in charge at each of those positions, and even more so into their position coaches that are beneath the defensive and offensive coordinators. So I think it's a good hire. I mean, I know that the argument is, for people that might not like the hire as much, is that Super Bowl winning coaches have not gone on to new teams after their Super Bowl wins and led those teams to Super Bowl victories. Which you could say, okay, so the Giants are going to fit that mold as well. But prior to 2015, no quarterback had won Super Bowls with two different franchises, and then Peyton Manning did it. Prior to 2016, no Super Bowl had ever gone into overtime, and then the Patriots and Falcons went into overtime. Prior to 2019 and 2018, in 2019, or I should say 2020, is when no team had ever played in their home stadium during the Super Bowl. In 2020, the Buccaneers did, and in 2021, then the Rams did. So just because something is unprecedented does not mean that it is impossible, and I don't think past coaches not making it to Super Bowls with new teams really is something that is causation. It's more just correlation if we're talking causation versus correlation. Because first of all, how many head coaches are going to be fired after going to Super Bowls? And how many coaches who have already won Super Bowls are going to take new jobs? I don't know what the sample size is. I mean, obviously, recent ones you can think of Doug Peterson, not winning a Super Bowl with the Eagles and then not being able to have the same success in Jacksonville. But I don't know. I think that you can kind of put that argument to bed, that is not something that really matters, that just because past head coaches have won Super Bowls with one team, when they went on to their next team, just because they did not win Super Bowls with that new team, does not mean that it cannot happen, or it does not mean that it is even likely that John Harbaugh does not win a Super Bowl with the New York Giants, any more or less likely than if he was just coming into this job for the first time, or hadn't won a Super Bowl with Baltimore and had been there for a long time. And the 2012 season, the 2012 run didn't happen. It ended in Denver, So I don't think that it would heighten the chances that, all things equal, whether or not John Harbaugh had won that Super Bowl in 2012 with the Baltimore Ravens, that would affect his chances at winning a Super Bowl now with the New York Giants, and perhaps makes it even more likely that somebody who has gone to a Super Bowl with Super Bowl experience and won a Super Bowl would be able to bring that experience and make it even more likely that the Giants have upped their chances at winning a Super Bowl during this John Harbaugh era. All of that will be decided, but from a pure process standpoint, it is a good move. We mentioned he's a big name. We mentioned he's bringing in Todd Monken, who has helped Lamar Jackson become a perennial MVP candidate. He won the MVP in 2019 with Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator, but then in 2023, he won it with Todd Monken as his offensive coordinator, and Todd Monken has really helped Lamar Jackson, who was already a good passer at college, in college at Louisville, but was more known for his running. He really solidified Lamar Jackson's place as not only a runner, but a good quarterback in the NFL, whether that was him developing Lamar Jackson or just with his play calls showcasing to the league that you don't just have to use this guy as a runner because he has that passing skill. And now he has the opportunity to do that with Jaxson Dart. And again, the number one thing that the Giants were concerned about when they were looking for their new head coach and they were interviewing candidates, one of the first three questions that every candidate was asked was, what is your plan with the quarterback? So that was front of mind, and it should have been front of mind. And John Harbaugh, they liked the plan that he came up with, and that Todd Monken assumedly had been in conversations about with John Harbaugh. I don't know what that plan is. We won't know until the 2026 season kicks off. And maybe we'll get some slight insights during his opening press conference, his introductory press conference, and mini camps and training camp and all that. But we won't know fully what that plan looks like until it is unveiled in September of 2026. What we probably know is that Todd Monken, who has used dual threat quarterbacks before, is going to try to find a successful way to utilize Jaxson Dart. We also know that Jaxson Dart is built with a more, or less, I should say, less fragile frame for an NFL quarterback than Lamar Jackson, who we've seen can get injured when he takes enough hits. Obviously, Jaxson Dart is always in the concussion tent, but his frame is built a little bit bigger so that if he is used as a running quarterback, the assumption would be, or the hope would be, that he has less of a risk of an injury when you use him in the running game, kind of like Josh Allen. So you've got a guy that can maximize the talents of Jaxson Dart as both a thrower and a runner, just like he was able to maximize both with for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. That doesn't mean that he's going to be able to replicate that same success, but it means process-wise you are in good hands there. And you're also not, if we're even throwing Todd Monken out, let's say he gets a head coaching job in this cycle and does not actually become the offensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens, John Harbaugh has put the right people in place to help the development of Joe Flacco, who won the Super Bowl, and has put the right people in place to aid with the development of Lamar Jackson. And has also been a part of those decisions of bringing both of those guys into the league via the draft and bringing those guys in at the precise right time, so that there was really no layover of bad quarterback play. As soon as Joe Flacco started to hit the gradual decline, the Ravens, and I would have to think John Harbaugh was a part of these decisions, drafted Lamar Jackson and brought him in to be the heir apparent. And you've had a smooth transition from one Super Bowl winning quarterback, although probably not elite, to an elite MVP winning quarterback that you have to give every year a good chance of going to the Super Bowl, even though he hasn't been there yet, just because of his abilities and the abilities of the team around him. So John Harbaugh has chosen those guys. John Harbaugh has handled quarterback situations well. And even in that season when they drafted Lamar Jackson, he handled that whole situation well, where Joe Flacco at that time had said that he did not want to be a mentor to the guy that would replace him. What could have caused schisms in that Baltimore locker room, John Harbaugh was able to ease any of that tension by having Joe Flacco as his starting quarterback to start the year. And then when it became clear that it was time for a new look to the offense, bringing in Lamar Jackson and that team going to the playoffs in Lamar Jackson's rookie season after he had started what I think was the last 6 games of that year. So he handles quarterbacks well. He handles quarterback controversy and quarterback succession well. Jaxson Dart, I think, is going to be in good hands with John Harbaugh. But a lot of it is going to be up to Jaxson Dart and how he develops. But I think you have given him a good chance and put him in a good place to have a good chance of having success at developing. And it will all depend on who now he brings in as his defensive coordinator, because that Giants defense has the potential to be one of the top units in the league if they can get the right guy in there pulling strings and calling plays. Abdul Carter only had, 4.5 sacks this year? But kind of like Jared Verse last year, pressure rate was near the top of the league. Brian Burns' pressure rate was near the top of the league. Dexter Lawrence took a step back this season, but we've seen what he can do if put into the right system. And I know that there were sometimes some issues with Zach Orr being the replacement of Mike Macdonald. I don't know if Zach Orr will come over to New York. But one, Mike Macdonald's shoes are pretty hard to fill, as we've seen with what he can do to a Seattle defense in just 2 years. But also John Harbaugh is the guy that brought in Mike Macdonald in the first place. And the story of how Mike Macdonald was discovered and rose up through the ranks very, very quickly, a lot of that can be attributed to the relationship with the Harbaugh family that Mike Macdonald was able to construct. And then the Harbaughs, John Harbaugh, with the advice of Jim Harbaugh, able to bring him into the full spotlight and have trust and confidence that this is a guy that knows football, even if he has not been experienced in the NFL as a positional coach or a defensive play caller, as experienced as some other defensive minds out there. John Harbaugh brought Mike Macdonald up, gave him the opportunity, cared just about the football of it all, and Mike Macdonald was able to go from there and create a fantastic defense with the Baltimore Ravens. So, even though Zach Orr didn't go as you would have hoped if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, you still know that John Harbaugh is going to be concerned about the football of it all, is going to be concerned about the scheme, and that is going to be his first priority, and it's not necessarily going to be the relationship building when he is looking for his next defensive coordinator. It's not going to be bring in the big name guy. It's going to be bring in the best guy, the one who has the highest merits, even if he has not had the experience of someone else. So it'll be an interesting look for the New York Giants next year. And they're in a good place. Their offensive line was good. Their defensive line was elite and can be even better. We'll see who that defensive coordinator is that John Harbaugh ends up hiring. But from a floor level, no matter who is in there, you should be able to get pressure with 4 guys a lot of the time. We didn't even mention Kayvon Thibodeau, who is, while not an elite edge rusher, has at least established himself as an above-average edge rusher. And that's really good to have as your third edge rusher guy who comes in to spell both Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, and then can also be used in like the NASCAR packages on third down. Does this mean the Giants will have success in 2026? And how long of a leash will John Harbaugh be given? I'd have to imagine it is longer of a leash than Brian Daboll got, and longer of a leash that Joe Judge got, and Ben McAdoo. All of those guys that the Giants have hired recently and fired relatively quickly into their tenures with the team. They have not had a long-term coach, really, since Tom Coughlin, who won 2 Super Bowls with them. John Harbaugh, I would assume, has that sort of equity built up where you can almost assume that he's going to be here in New York for at least 5 years and has that amount of time to mold the team into what he molded Baltimore into. And let's remember, the 2007 Baltimore Ravens, which was their last year with Brian Billick as head coach, were not good. And some of that was because of a Steve McNair injury. The defense still had its ups. So it might have been in a better place than this New York Giants team was, but they go from a losing record in 2007 to bringing John Harbaugh in, and he brings them to the AFC Championship game in his first season. So it wouldn't be surprising if a turnaround like that happens for the New York Giants. I don't know that it will, but the pieces are in place. When you have a foundation built in the trenches like the Giants do right now, you're in a good place. You have a quarterback that you trust, that the organization has put its trust into. Whether that trust is warranted, we will see. But they have a fan-favorite running back. They'll have Malik Neighbors coming back. Wan'Dale Robinson is leaving. Maybe you target a wide receiver in the draft or free agency. Or maybe you bring Wan'Dale Robinson back. But you've got a lot of puzzle pieces that are starting to fit together. And I think that John Harbaugh can make this into a playoff team in his first year, as long as he gets the right guy to run that defense. So I think this is a great hire. It means that we are 0 for 1 on our coaching predictions. I had John Harbaugh going to Atlanta, but I also had Atlanta as a more desirable spot, and I was going coach by coach and making my picks based on the most desirable coaching spot gets the top candidate of its choosing, and then everything else from there. So technically, John Harbaugh was not on the table by the time that I got into the New York Giants, but he is and would have been, obviously, one of the top candidates in our little coaching prediction segment last week. Other teams still conducting their interviews. Maybe by the time we're finished recording, we'll have another head coach, and then we can break in with an emergency podcast for that. But that's where the coaching cycle is at right now. And we'll continue to update with you with all of the coaching carousel happenings as the playoffs go on and as we continue to have a couple of shows per week during this part of the season. Another piece of news that came out during this last week and since we last recorded is that Oregon quarterback Dante Moore will not declare for the NFL draft. And this is big because I think it was assumed that the number 1 pick and number 2 pick would be in whatever order, either Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore. All depending on what the Raiders wanted Moore at quarterback and we're looking for. Dante Moore, not as refined yet as Fernando Mendoza, but certainly has the more livelier arm. And every time he throws the football, it looks easy for him. He's not really extenuating himself, using extra energy. Everything just kind of has this natural flow to it when he's throwing the football. But there were some issues when under pressure and when having to go deeper into his reads that prevented him, I think, from declaring this year, even though he probably still would have gotten a first or second round pick, or a first or second overall pick, I should say, no matter what. I think preparing himself for the NFL with one more year in college is going to be super, super helpful. Now his offensive coordinator is gone. Will Stein took the head coaching job at Kentucky, I believe. It's not the Grey Duck college football show, so if I'm wrong there, it's not a big deal. But it gives him another 13, 14, 15 games, depending on, how well Oregon does, and they're likely going to be a national championship contender once again, especially with some of the guys that they are getting back, like Evan Stewart. He won't have his big tight end, but a lot of his wide receivers were injured throughout most of this year. And the statistics recently have shown that the more experience you get in college, the higher likelihood of success you'll have in the NFL. That doesn't mean it's going to be a blanket statement for every single quarterback prospect that comes out, but it's something that has been a recent trend. So you're giving yourself a good really nice foundation to build upon in college and giving yourself a better shot to have a good career in the National Football League, and probably a little bit sneakily too. And I know we probably say this every year, but the 2027 quarterback draft class is supposed to be pretty good, depending on who all comes out. And maybe if you're Dante Moore, you're not QB1, QB2 out of that class. Maybe you're QB4, QB5, and you're going to a team that is not as much of a train wreck as, say, where the New York Jets currently are. Although I think the New York Jets are, for a young quarterback, surprisingly a pretty decent spot because of the strengths they have along their offensive line. But it's an organization where quarterbacks, for whatever reason, regardless of head coach, regardless of offensive coordinator, have come to die at the beginning of their NFL careers and have needed to be revived elsewhere if they were going to have good NFL careers. And some of that is maybe, just general managers making bad picks at quarterback, but maybe there's some bad mojo as well that could scare away some of these college prospects when they see that the New York Jets are picking in the top 3 to 5 of a certain NFL draft. I don't know if that played a big factor into Dante Moore's decision, but what does matter is that there is one top quarterback in this 2026 draft class, and that is Fernando Mendoza. Ty Simpson probably now going to go into the first round, but I don't think a team is going to elevate him into the top 10. I think Ty Simpson is a guy that perhaps the Jets trade back into the end of the first round to get, or a guy that is scooped up by the Rams or Steelers in the middle or late rounds. But I don't think Ty Simpson is going to be a guy that is now just going to slot in where Dante Moore had been going, unless the Jets really want to reach at number 2, which I don't think they would. I could still see him landing with the Jets again as a trade back up into the first round, or even with the 16th overall pick that they have. But now it is cemented that the number 1 quarterback, no matter what, is going to be Fernando Mendoza. And your only chance, if you are a team, at getting a game-changing quarterback is going to be by negotiating with the Las Vegas Raiders, who, need a game-changing quarterback. So this is nothing but good news for the Raiders. We don't know what their organizational opinion about Fernando Mendoza is. I know my opinion on Fernando Mendoza, and that is he is a very accurate quarterback. He has an above average arm in terms of his ability to drive the ball. It's not elite. He has good mechanics. He makes quick reads. He throws in rhythm. Reminds me kind of like Sam Bradford when he was with the Vikings before his injury. An accurate quarterback that really can put the ball wherever he wants to. And we've seen him to be a winner here with Indiana, obviously, and have success in big moments. But there is a cap on his ceiling because he does not have a Cam Ward arm. He is not able to rip it like Jordan Love or Patrick Mahomes. And the guys with those ceilings still can get you to Super Bowls and can still win you Super Bowls because accuracy is such a big part, and reading a defense and the mental processing part of the game is such a big part. But is Tom Brady looking for someone that can extend themselves even more? We don't know that. What we know is that if he does not, there are going to be teams that would be interested in taking Fernando Mendoza. And if we're going by the law of supply and demand, you can get a pretty good haul if you are the Las Vegas Raiders and are comfortable with sitting with Geno Smith for another season. And I think all of it is also going to come down to who they bring in as head coach. But I think ultimately it'll be Tom Brady and John Spytek coming to the decision as to whether or not they think Fernando Mendoza is worthy of the first pick or if they should wait until next year's draft class. And let's not forget, if you trade with a team like Arizona or Miami out of that spot, whereas Arizona and Miami don't have the 2 number 1 picks in the first round that a Cleveland, a Los Angeles Rams, or New York Jets would have, they can offer you a stopgap quarterback if you don't like Geno Smith, but you still want to be competitive next year. Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, those guys are going to be on the market, we think, in this offseason. They have big contracts, and we saw that when you trade quarterbacks with big contracts, like Brock Osweiler or Jared Goff, the team that gets the quarterback might also be getting even more value back with the quarterback because the contract of said quarterback has forced him to be a negative value add to the trade. So now you're getting even more value, perhaps, if, say, you go Miami at number 11, they trade 11 and Tua Tagovailoa, along with a first-round pick next year and their second-round pick. I don't know how all of the trading charts would say about that. I know that there's going to be a premium on the quarterback position. And even some of these teams that they could be negotiating with, like the Dolphins and the Browns and the Cardinals, don't even have their head coach yet. So we're not even sure what direction they want to go. But those are options, or at least could be options for the Raiders if they are not completely in love with Fernando Mendoza. Now, if you are in love with Fernando Mendoza, I think, yes, just take him with that number 1 pick, obviously. But this thought experiment that we're doing is going to be, if you do not like Fernando Mendoza, if you are Tom Brady, what is going to be the best course of action with that number 1 pick? Do you go Cleveland with the 2 first-round picks? Do you do New York with 2 first-round picks, and even more so 2 first-round picks within the top 16, and you also only have to move down 1 spot, so if you weren't interested in Fernando Mendoza, you're still getting your guy anyway. Arizona, you only have to move down 2 spots, and there's a chance you pick up an extra first-rounder and Kyler Murray, or a really high second-round pick. Miami, You have to move down a little bit further, but that allows you to try and get even more in terms of additional draft capital, and could also bring in Tua if you don't like Geno Smith. And the Rams and the Steelers are two teams. The Rams especially would use Fernando Mendoza as the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford and probably have him sit a year. But you can get 2 first rounds there, and because those are lower first rounds, you might even be able to get a first round pick next year, or 2 first rounders, a second rounder. There's a lot of different options that you have. And then Pittsburgh, while they don't have a quarterback to offer you, and if he goes there, Fernando Mendoza would probably be starting right away unless Aaron Rodgers decides to come back. But you could get first round capital there. You could get DK Metcalf. And I think if you are the Las Vegas Raiders, where you were a train wreck at all sorts of positions except for maybe tight end, Colton Miller when he was healthy, and Max Crosby, you have a lot of different holes to fill. And again, I would say, still, if you like Fernando Mendoza, make that your priority, because we saw what New England did with a lot of holes to fill in the 2024 draft. With the number 3 overall pick, they went and just got the quarterback that they thought was going to be the game changer. So if the Raiders think that Fernando Mendoza is going to be that game changer, do not wait to build the rest of your team around him. Take him and bring him in. But truly believe that. If you do not think that, or if you have your doubts about that, then trade down and spend this draft maximizing the capital you get from that trade down, and maybe in subsequent trade downs, to build along the trenches of that defensive line, to fix that defense, to fix that offense. And then next year, maybe in the offseason, Geno Smith, Tua, Kyler, whoever it is that is your quarterback next year, has a big season. And you don't even have to go quarterback right away. You give yourself flexibility there even. But even if not, even if those guys are who they were this year and the year before, then at the very least, you're picking in the top again. You've hopefully, with Tom Brady's and John Spytek's team-building philosophy, have been able to put whatever quarterback you choose in the 2027 NFL draft into a good spot. So we won't know this until draft day, or until a trade before draft day, whether or not Tom Brady and John Spytek like Fernando Mendoza or not. And if they don't, trade the pick, obviously. And if they love him, take him. Don't worry about building the rest of the team around him. That is what the Dante Moore decision has kind of created now for the Las Vegas Raiders. They have benefited from this greatly, especially if they are not as high on Fernando Mendoza as perhaps I am, or perhaps other teams in the NFL are. Last show, I mentioned that we would go through my All-Pro team after we went through the All-Pro team that was announced by the NFL, so let's do it here quickly before heading into our divisional round playoffs. I went 3 teams deep, and at quarterback, Drake May is on the first team, Matthew Stafford is on the second team, and then Josh Allen got to the third team. I went 1 running back for the first team and for each of these successive teams. So Bijan Robinson is RB1, Devon Achane is the second team running back, and then James Cook is the third running back. And there's, whereas the All-Pro teams that are the All-Pro teams of record come from a panel of voters on the Associated Press, this is just coming from one voter, that is me, the Grey Duck All-Pro team. 3 wide receiver spots for each team. First team, it's Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and George Pickens. Second team, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and CeeDee Lamb. And then third team, you'll notice I did leave Chris Olave, who made the second team of the AP All-Pro team. Left him off the list because it's Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Zay Flowers, who quietly had a pretty good year, despite not always having Lamar Jackson at quarterback, and sometimes having Cooper Rush and Tyler Huntley. Going to tight end, this one, I think pretty obviously for tight end 1, Trey McBride. When you set the record for most tight end receptions of all time in a season, I think that gives you the rite of passage there. Colston Loveland is my number 2, and he had a very resurgent second half of the season. Tyler Warren was getting all of the hype early on in the year, but I think Colston Loveland, with his 850 receiving yards this season, beat out Tyler Warren with the second half that he was able to have. And then Kyle Pitts will make the third team tight end. Along the offensive line, left to right on the first team, Garrett Bowles, Quentin Nelson, Aaron Brewer. I moved him up from second team that he was on AP and basically just switched him and Creed Humphrey. Right guard Quinn Miners and right tackle Penei Sewell. Second team, Tristan Wirfs, Peter Skoronski, Creed Humphrey, Chris Lindstrom, and Zach Tom of the Green Bay Packers. Skoronski, I believe, of the Tennessee Titans, and then Lindstrom, just an incredible zone scheme blocker for the Atlanta Falcons. Then on the third team, left to right, Jordan Mailata, Joe Thuney, Tyler Linderbaum, Mike Onwenu, and Darnell Wright. That's the offense for the first, second, and third team of the Grey Duck All-Pro squads. We'll go to the defense. 2 edge rushers, whereas the AP did 3 edge rushers. You only have 2 edges to come off of in the NFL, so I had 2 edge rushers for each of these teams. And it's Will Anderson and Myles Garrett on the first team. It is Michael Parsons and Nick Benito on the second team. And then Josh Hines Allen and Abdul Carter on the third team. Along the interior defensive line, 2 at each position, Jeffrey Simmons and Quinnen Williams on the first team. Cam Hayward and Poona Ford on the second team. And then Jalen Redmond of Minnesota and Kobe Turner of the Rams on the third team. The Rams have like a sneakily really good defensive line even without Jared Verse and Byron Young. Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, Kobe Turner, Josiah Stewart. If Verse and Young were out for this game, they still would have a top defensive line to match up against Chicago's offensive line in the divisional round. 2 off-the-ball linebackers for each team, Devin Bush and Devin Lloyd on the first team, Jack Campbell and Roquan Smith on the second team, and then Divine Diablo and Jihad Campbell, the rookie from the Philadelphia Eagles, are on the third team. 2 outside corners and 1 nickel corner for each team. So outside corners on the first team, Devon Witherspoon and Jamal Dean, with the nickel being Cooper DeJean. On the second team, the outside guys are Kamari Lassiter and Trent McDuffie, with the nickel being Jaquan McMillan. And then on the third team, it's Quinyon Mitchell and Mike Jackson on the outside of the Carolina Panthers, with Jerian Jones of the Jacksonville Jaguars as my nickel cornerback 3. Onto the safeties, Jalen Hawkins and Kyle Hamilton. I did 1 safety who had the majority of his snaps at free safety, the deep safety, for one of these spots for each team, and then the one that was more in the box or slot for each of these teams. So Jalen Hawkins, the deep safety, Kyle Hamilton, the box safety. On the second team, Xavier McKinney, the deep safety, and Jalen Petrie, the box safety. And then third team, Brian Cook of the Chiefs as the deep safety, and Derwin James of the Chargers as the box slot safety. I did do special teams. Kicker, we'll go 1, 2, and 3. Will Reichard, Brandon Aubrey, and Chase McLaughlin. Punters, Austin McNamara, Michael Dixon, and Daniel Whelan. Kick returners, Jalen Noel, Charlie Jones, and Kavonte Turpin. And punt returners, Isaiah Williams, Kamiri DK, and Cameron Johnson. So a couple of rookies with DK and Johnson making it on the punt return team. So that is the Grey Duck All-Pro team. Just an interesting little thought experiment that I had. You can drop your favorite quarterbacks or favorite player at each position in the comments below. Or don't. Just do whatever you need to do. Let me know what you think about those All-Pro teams. Now we're getting back into the meat and potatoes of the episode. And that is Divisional Weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe the best weekend, because you've gotten out these wild card teams, you assume, most of the time, that are more likely to be fraudulent. And now every single one of the 8 teams left, especially this year, I think has a legitimate shot to make it to the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl. And I even ranked the teams that I thought. I think each of them are give or take around the 25% mark. And the teams that I like a little bit more in each of these conferences to make the Super Bowl probably don't go higher at the most, like 28%, and then don't go at the lowest at 22%. So you're all hovering around that 25% mark. There's not a lot of sort of teams that I would give one heavy advantage to over another. So from the AFC, the teams that I think have the most likely chances to get to the Super Bowl would be the Houston Texans, number 1, the Buffalo Bills, number 2, the Denver Broncos, number 3, and the New England Patriots, number 4. From the NFC, the teams that I like from highest chances to lowest, the Los Angeles Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Chicago Bears. But again, at the very lowest, I would probably have Chicago and New England as a 22% chance to make the Super Bowl from their conference. So still right around that 25% mark. And one of the reasons that I have the teams in the order that I do is because of the matchups that I may or may like better for one of the teams outside of the other. Like Seattle, all things equal, I would probably say has the better chance over Los Angeles, but they have a tougher matchup for them, in my opinion, than the Rams do in this next round. So Seattle and Los Angeles might not even match up in the NFC Championship game because San Francisco, I think, can give Seattle a bit more of a run for their money than Chicago would be able to against the Los Angeles Rams. So let's talk about those matchups, because I think a lot of these are going to be pretty tight games, and you can really see them going one way or another. And the first of those, we'll start in chronological order. On Saturday, it is the Buffalo Bills visiting the 1 seed, the Denver Broncos. Right before recording this, Denver was a 1.5-point favorite and was minus 120 to win this game at home. And you can see why, because of how good their defense is. If Denver wins this game, it is going to be on the backs of their defense and doing what their offense has been able to do all season long, relying on their screen game. The defense needs to keep a spy in on Josh Allen, kind of like Houston did when Houston was able to both pressure Josh Allen and then not allow him to escape from the pocket as often, and not use his legs and not let his legs have a big impact on the game. That is how Houston beat Buffalo late in the season. That is what Denver needs to do. And whether that's Justin Strnad or you put a safety even, like Hufanga, as a spy on Josh Allen so that when he does feel the pressure that this Broncos defensive line has created against every single team, he is not able to go to his secondary option, which is his legs. He's not able to go to the option that allows him to extend the play as much as he would want. Because there are so many things that you need to do in order to slow down Josh Allen. He has so many options that he can go to if one thing is not there. If standing tall in the pocket is not available to him, he can work with his legs. And he can not only just run the football, but extend the play and get out to the sideline and just wait for his wide receivers, who are not elite, and some are probably not even in the top 75 of NFL wide receivers this season. If you allow them 7 seconds to run with Josh Allen bootlegging out to his right or escaping the pocket to his left, if you allow them all that time, they're going to get open. Even if Cortland Sutton and Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan are maybe the best 1-2-3 cornerback group combined in the NFL, they're still not going to be able to hold their own consistently for 7 straight seconds. So you need to have a spy on Josh Allen so that anytime he does try to escape the pocket under pressure, you are able to get to him quickly. You also do not want to blitz Josh Allen. You want to keep rushing your 4 defensive linemen and getting pressure on him that way. And that is what the Broncos have been able to do this season. They do blitz a lot, but I think you want to ramp that number down a little bit and use blitzes at more opportune times here in this game. I'm not saying go away completely from the blitzes, but if you blitz Josh Allen at the rate that Josh Allen has been blitzed throughout the course of if you blitz Josh Allen at the rate that Denver has blitzed quarterbacks throughout the course of this season, I think Josh Allen is going to be able to dice that defense up with short passes, with hot routes, with screens. We forget that Josh Allen, despite being a big-armed quarterback, has one of the lower depth of target metrics in the NFL, which means he targets his wide receivers closer to the line of scrimmage than a lot of other quarterbacks this season. Sometimes because of the pressure, sometimes because Joe Brady likes to run a lot of screens or a lot of swings, because you want to get James Cook involved in the receiving game. So if you blitz, you are giving the Bills an opportunity to have a numbers advantage on one of those plays. Again, you still should blitz at times, but for the most part, make your game plan rushing those 4 defensive linemen and blitz at a lower rate than you did this season. And then, as well, we have to stay gap sound in your rushing. Because even if you have the spy in Hufanga, if Nick Medino, for instance, does not have a two-way go on a play and acts as if he does have a two-way go and clogs up another gap with a defensive lineman that was supposed to have that gap, like Zach Allen. Benito goes to the inside, Zach Allen goes to the outside shoulder of the guard. Now you have 2 gaps that are open for Josh Allen to try and run through. And now Hufanga, or whoever it is, as your spy, is at a disadvantage. So you need to make sure that all players that are rushing the passer stay gap disciplined, and in the run game as well, because James Cook can exploit you. That offensive line of Buffalo, even with as good as the defensive line for Denver is, can still exploit those gaps in the run game if your front 7 are not gap disciplined. I think this probably is going to be the biggest factor out of everything that we talk about, is staying gap discipline in this game and not allowing the running game of Buffalo to get all the way going. Because even if you're getting pressure on Josh Allen and doing everything else, if that running game is going, it allows a lot more opportunities for Allen to use play action and Allen to dice up your defense. That is the key for Denver's defense. Denver's offense is going up against a Buffalo defense that has a high missed tackle rate. And it helps that Marvin Mims and RJ Harvey are players that can exploit that in the short passing game, where Bo Nix does not have to go out of the normal Broncos game plan a ton in this contest. You can do a lot of the screens, a lot of the swings, and expect to get good yards out of them. One, because it just seems like Denver always has those plays blocked off well, with wide receivers and tight ends that are willing to block, and then offensive linemen that are able to get out to the edge and block for those screens. And also because of that missed tackle rate. I think you are going to get more yards on those shorter, quicker passes than you would against most other teams in the NFL. And you're already a team that maximizes the amount of yards that you can get on those plays, and probably run them better than most squads in the league and call them at a more timelier manner than other teams. And then you also want to make sure that you're not forcing Bo Nix into his second, third, and fourth reads. The second and third level of Buffalo, you want to make the decision quick so that they are reacting to that, to the quick passing game. So you don't want to give him a lot of concepts that have second and third reads. You want to make him to go bam, bam, so that a team that is already bad at tackling is not in the right place or hasn't been given time to get to a better place and a better angle when they are covering wide receivers. You'd like to run the ball, but I think that screen game and that quick passing game needs to be the bread and butter of Denver. However, if I'm going to go with who has the higher chances to win this game, I still like Buffalo to win. For one, I don't think that these two teams, despite having different records from the 2024 season, I don't think they're that much different than they were last year when they met in the playoffs and when the Bills won 31-7. I think this Bills team is just better. They're better, certainly on the offensive side of the football. And while they have had their struggles on the defensive side of the football, it has gotten better a little bit recently. And if you are Buffalo's defense, one of the things that has worked well for you recently, and especially in this last game against Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, is the rate at which they were disguising their coverages and the effectiveness of those disguised coverages. The end-of-game interception against Trevor Lawrence came on a disguised coverage. The one that sealed the win. And granted, part of that was because of some of the tips, or because of a tip off the hands of the wide receiver who was in a contested catch situation. Jacoby Myers had Tre'Davious White on him. But it didn't matter that Jacksonville had so much success running the ball because of how well Buffalo was getting those disguises. I think Sean Payton and Bo Nix, when they are at their best, it is because they are able to dissect what the defense is doing and forcing the defense to blitz Nix in order to get pressure and taking advantage of the mismatch that blitz creates in the secondary. That is when they are at their best. But if you disguise well and are not making it as easy for Nix and for Payton to find the right place to exploit on blitzes, then they're going to have a harder time moving the football. And something else you can do to even give Bo Nix that extra second to think, like we said, the Broncos offense wants to go quick and force Buffalo to react. They want to force you to react. But if you are making them react to what you are doing or making them be a little bit more hesitant, I think you have taken the advantage that the Broncos offense should be able to have over Buffalo. I think you have taken that away. And so it is those good disguises that we saw against Jacksonville. Rotating your safeties down, or when you're doing cover 3, sometimes doing cloud, sometimes doing sky, putting different deep corners back there or deep players back there. Not always just the outside corners and the deep safety. Sometimes you can put the nickel corner, the box safety, and the free safety as your 3 deep defenders. Or you can rotate out of the 1 shell into a 2 shell, and all of a sudden you're playing cover 4, or you're playing a match coverage against Denver. If you can get Bo Nix thinking for an extra second about not knowing where to go to the football, that'll help your blitzes be more effective, and it will limit what Denver's offense is able to do. And then another thing is, don't blitz that much, because Bo Nix is good, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL against the blitz, because of some of the play designs from Sean Payton and because of his experience as a starting quarterback at Auburn, Oregon. One of those guys, like we mentioned earlier, that had a lot of snaps in college and has found success in the NFL. His biggest strength is he knows where to exploit on those blitzes. So you don't want to blitz, but you also want to get him out of the pocket, because Bo Nix is a player that will vacate the pocket if he thinks there is pressure. So simulate the pressures. Make him guess where the pressure is coming from. And do some of these zone blitzes where it's not just the 4 defensive linemen or the 2 defensive linemen or the 2 edge rushers, but you're mixing it up with some fire zones that confuse Bo Nix a little bit more. And even if you're only bringing 4, he is seeing color flash before him. And when Bo Nix sees the color flash of your jersey, that is when he is often vacating the clean pocket. And against the blitz, he is not really a special quarterback, or at least has not shown himself when he is not against the blitz to be a special quarterback. And he has most of his problems and most of his turnover-worthy plays when he has vacated a pocket that he did not need to vacate. So that is what you were trying to do. You were trying to simulate the pressure and disguise well so that he can't make those quick reads. And then you also want to force the Broncos to use R.J. Harvey as a runner a little bit more and not let him get out into the passing game by bringing more inside pressure, but also by forcing him to bounce a lot of his plays to the outside. And you'd think, well, an elusive runner that R.J. Harvey is, he should have success with that. But I think where the Bills have had trouble in their run game is when they've gone up against these one-cut backs through holes that are created along the defensive line and the offensive lineman able to get to the second level. If you are spilling the run out to the outside, it's not going to matter as much if those defensive linemen get out to the second level. It's not going to matter that you have a one-cut back like ETN for Jacksonville, who just saw the hole, took advantage of it, didn't need to do anything fancy or creative in order to get there, but just have the vision and burst through. If J.K. Dobbins plays, I'm not sure what his status is, but I know that there were reports that he might be practicing this week and come off of the IR. I think that makes it a little bit harder for Buffalo because he is that one-cut guy, and now I think the dynamic ability of both Harvey and Dobbins paired together makes it a little bit trickier for Denver or for Buffalo to stop Denver's rushing offense. And then again, that gives you some of the advantages if you are Denver, if you are able to run with both of those guys. But I don't know. I don't know if J.K. Dobbins is playing or not as of recording this. So that's your key on defense. Do not blitz, but simulate your pressure. And when you blitz, make sure you're disguising your coverage well so that Bo Nix has a more difficult time exploiting mismatches. And then on offense, use a lot of your 2 and 3 tight end sets, regardless of if you are running or passing the football. The Bills might have the best tight end room collectively in the NFL when you go 1, 2, 3. Because Dalton Kincaid is probably a top 10, 15 tight end in the NFL. Dawson Knox has been reliable and has been in that conversation as well at parts during his career. And the rookie from Georgia Tech, Jaxson Dart, is having a really good season. Kind of in every facet. He's not a dynamic route runner, but yet his yards per route run is still among the top of tight ends in the NFL. It's not at the very top, but he's able to make plays offensively, and then he is, I think, the best blocking tight end, and that was the big draw for him coming out of college, is that he can both run block and pass block well, and the film and the grades have both shown that to be true, that he is good at pass blocking, he is good at run blocking, so that if you need some extra protection against a strong Denver defensive line, keeping Hawes in as a blocker or at least as a chipper, as your third tight end, is going to really help you prevent Josh Allen from feeling too much pressure in this game where it becomes a broken game for Buffalo. And then, of course, it also helps to have a big set in the blocking game so that you can establish James Cook and Josh Allen's running ability. If I'm Buffalo, my game plan on offense is outside zone early, play action off of that early to some tight end leaks or some tight end dumps and maybe a tight end screen. And then really rely on the quick passing game. And if you are mixing all of that together effectively and executing well, then I think Denver is going to have a tough time stopping you in those realms. Another reason why you bring in a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets is because the biggest mismatch that Denver has defensively to Buffalo's offense, their biggest strength is their cornerback room with Surtain and Riley Moss. He gets penalized a lot, but he's also getting penalties because he's sticky in coverage and playing physical. He's a good outside corner. And then Jaquan McMillan, the last 2 seasons, has been one of the top slot cornerbacks quietly in the NFL. And then Courtland Sutton, we all know, year in, year out, is probably cornerback 1, the reigning defensive player of the year. And even on a year this year where he didn't have his best season, he's probably at worst, cornerback 5 in the NFL? And the Buffalo Bills don't have any game-changing wide receivers. Khalil Shakir is the closest to that, but he is limited in what he can do when compared to other big-name wide receivers in the NFL. He's the underneath guy. He's your slot guy. He's your twitchy player that can get open deep, but is a little bit more undersized and is going to rely on the yards after the catch. So you don't have a matchup that you can exploit there with your wide receivers against their cornerbacks, but you can get your tight ends involved in the passing game early and often. And now you're forcing Denver out of their defensive game plan by targeting tight ends more. Maybe you're forcing more corners to cover tight ends or forcing safeties down because of the mismatch that the tight ends can have against the linebackers. And now that opens up a little bit more deeper down the field. So I like that game plan. Outside zone into some play action, tight end screens, play action, tight end leaks, and then use that quick passing game with the tight ends early and open everything up from there. And I think that is what Buffalo does, and I think they win this game. We'll go 30-16. Again, I don't think the teams are that much different from last year, and I think a limited Denver offense that has kind of shown it to not be as dynamic as you would like over the last 2 years with Bo Nix leading things. I don't think that limited offense can take advantage of the weaknesses that are many for Buffalo's defense. And I think because they are not able to take full advantage of that Buffalo is able to win this game. And it is not dissimilar to what last season's playoff game between these two teams looked like. Book it for Buffalo. On to game number 2 on Saturday. And this game is going to feature the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks for the 3rd time this season. Seattle most recently played against San Francisco in Week 18. Obviously, San Francisco has had a different game since then in the wild card round, beating the reigning Super Bowl champs 23-19. These two teams split their regular season series, with San Francisco winning the very first game of the season and Seattle winning the very last game of the season. And Seattle, right now, is a 7-point favorite and are minus 340 on the money line. An interesting thing to look out for here is on the injury report, Sam Darnold has shown up. Now, it is still likely that he will play, according to reports coming out of Seattle, both within the team and beat writers who cover the team, but it is an oblique injury, and he is questionable. So there is a chance that it is Drew Lock or even Jalen Milroe getting a lot of snaps for Seattle at quarterback. I wouldn't put it at a high chance, but certainly more of a chance than you would be comfortable with if you are a Seattle Seahawks fan, relying on Drew Lock to get you through a game in the playoffs against a division rival. Regardless of who is at quarterback for Seattle, I think San Francisco's game plan defensively stays the same. And I think that you really just need to blitz and blitz and blitz, because your only chance at stopping Seattle's offense is getting pressure on Sam Darnold. And San Francisco's defense, because of all of the injuries this season, has put up one of the lower pressure rates in the NFL. And we saw how disruptive at this time last year the Los Angeles Rams and the Detroit Lions were when they spammed these inside linebacker these cross-dog linebacker blitzes against Sam Darnold when he was with the Vikings. So much so to that the yards per drop back for Sam Darnold in that wild card loss to the Los Angeles Rams was a negative number because of all of the sacks that he had to take. It needs to be quick pressure. It needs to be a solid ability to blitz Darnold, because the major weak link on that offensive line is Anthony Bradford at guard. I think you can take advantage of that if you are San Francisco and make things a bit hellish for Darnold. And that's when he can start to make mistakes. And it's when this offense for Seattle wouldn't be able to get into what it would want to get to if you are able to effectively do that. So go down swinging and just continue to blitz and blitz and blitz. The 49ers blitz at a lower rate than most of the NFL. I think their blitz rate was somewhere around 21%. But I think that is what they need to do in order to have a chance against Seattle's offense. Now, for San Francisco on offense, it is going to be the quick passing game. Because Brock Purdy, if he is under pressure, is not as good. And I think the gap between Brock Purdy under pressure and Brock Purdy not under pressure is as large as any quarterback in the NFL. So you want to get that passing game going quickly. And I don't know if you can kind of do what you've relied upon a lot during the season, which is bring in heavy personnel groupings with the assumption that the defense will bring out heavy personnel groupings to match. And then because your heavier personnel is more athletic than most other teams' heavier personnel, you are able to exploit a ton of mismatches. But now you don't have George Kittle. And I understand that George Kittle got injured or was not the player out there in the first game of the season when Seattle lost to San Francisco. But I don't think that Jake Tonges is going to be at the same level of what George Kittle can provide as both a blocker and a pass catcher, and does not have that same athleticism to take advantage of any mismatches. And plus, Seattle, regardless of the personnel, uses nickel pretty much exclusively. So when we are talking about establishing the run early, I don't know if that plan would have as much success for San Francisco than it would against another team. So you want the quick passing game early. And you want to get Christian McCaffrey involved in the passing game, and maybe that can set up the run. You also want to make sure you're bringing extra protection against a good defensive line that Seattle has. You want to keep Tonges on the field a lot. You want to keep Juszczyk on the field a lot, because he can be a chip and release player that can be effective. We saw that against Philadelphia, where he would give Brock Purdy an extra second, then release, and he would be open because he's kind of forgotten about within the scheme of a defense, and he had, I think, the second highest receptions and receiving yards in that game. So it would need to be a similar game for him in this one in order for San Francisco's offense to really compete with the defense of Seattle, is with those chip and releases with Tonges and with Juszczyk. And then just hoping, as he has so often this year, that Christian McCaffrey, in both phases of what he can do, is able to be effective and put the team on his back. And that certainly is something that I could see happening. But I do like Seattle's chances a bit better. And part of that is a reason we already said. That is Seattle's personnel and their choice of personnel is not dependent on the offense's choice of personnel. They will stay in nickel. I think 80% is what I saw. 80% of the time they are in a 3-cornerback set, and they will go to dime a lot as well, with a lot of defensive backs, with Josh Jobe. And those guys still, when they are in nickel and when they are in dime, according to the next gen stats, give up the lowest, the worst offensive run game EPA. Or the second worst. I guess Minnesota in nickel had a better negative EPA per attempt against the run when they were nickel personnel. But Seattle is right there with them. And when it comes to dime personnel, which is 6 defensive backs, it's no contest. Seattle still has a negative, forces their teams into a negative expected points value when they run the football against them in dime personnels. So it doesn't really matter because Seattle's athletes can play with more physicality than San Francisco's big personnel can play with athleticism. And that neutralizes the major advantage that Kyle Shanahan's offense has had against teams this season. And so now you're not getting the 48 points that you were able to rack up against the Chicago Bears, but you are becoming a more normalized offense with a quarterback that is good, but has weaknesses that can be exploited in Brock Purdy. So they're going to stay in nickel, they're going to stick to their game plan, and then they are going to blitz. And that is because Brock Purdy is very, very subpar when blitz. He's the 25th EPA per drop back in the NFL when he is blitzed. And he has one of the top EPA dropbacks in the NFL when he is not blitzed. So just by that, if you are Seattle, you want to bring extra pressure to get to Purdy quicker and force him into quicker decisions and not let him, much like we said about Bo Nix, not let him have the time to really dissect the field. Here are some quarterbacks that are better against the blitz this season than Brock Purdy was. Tua Tagovailoa, Spencer Rattler, Jaxson Dart, Jacoby Brissett, and Geno Smith. You want to blitz, and it seems like Tyrese Knight, who has not played for a while, since week 13 or week 14, is off of the injury report. And he has one of the higher pass rushing grades among linebackers in the NFL. And if you can do that, if you can use Tyrese Knight as a blitzer, not just him, but use him a lot because he has been your most effective blitzer from the second level, it's going to put a lot of pressure onto Brock Purdy, and pressure that I'm not sure he will be able to handle in this case. Especially if you give Nick Emmanwori one goal in this game, and that is to shut down Christian McCaffrey in the passing game. And they matched up a couple of times against one another in Week 18, and Emmanwori had a good grade when they were matched up in the passing game against one another. You want to make sure that Emmanwori is shadowing Christian McCaffrey because he is the best chance that the 49ers have on offense of trying to break this game open. And Emmanwori, the rookie, has shown that he can at least contain Christian McCaffrey a little bit more than some others might be able to, or than as just a straight zone defense might be able to. So you are using Tyrese Knight as a blitzer. You are using Nick Emmanwori to limit Christian McCaffrey's impact on this game as a pass catcher. And you want to get Brock Purdy off schedule. And the Seahawks, when they blitz, are one of the more effective teams in the NFL. They do not give up the big plays when they blitz. They give up the lowest EPA per dropback to offenses in the NFL when blitzing the quarterback. So get Brock Purdy off schedule. I think they will. This defense for Seattle has just been fantastic all season long, and I think they continue to be that way in this game as long as Sam Darnold is playing. And if it is Drew Lock or Jalen Milroe, it becomes a little bit more questionable. But if Sam Darnold does play through the oblique injury, I think you've got a pretty good chance of not needing him to go too far out of the game plan. If you're Seattle, you want to stick with the run, even if it is not working early. When Seattle lost to San Francisco back in week 1, they actually ran the ball more efficiently than they did when they won in week 18. The problem was when they ran the football, they were not doing it often. And when they ran the football, they did not have any play action except for one play in that game. In that first game of the season, they only did one play action against San Francisco. So they didn't run the ball a ton. It didn't allow them to get to play action. And it forced Sam Darnold's Seattle debut to be less than stellar. This last game, they ran the ball a lot despite not running the ball as efficiently as they did in week 1. And to be clear, they still didn't run the ball super efficiently in week 1 either, but they just did it better. They stuck with the run despite at times not having success with it. And then 38% of their dropbacks were play-action dropbacks. And Sam Darnold is the best play-action quarterback in the NFL this year. So if you're Clint Kubiak, do not get away from the run. Do not kind of fall into those traps that you did in the first week of the season. Keep running the ball so that you can get to play action. The stats have shown that it doesn't matter how well you run the ball to make play action effective. It matters that you have run the ball. It matters how often you are running the ball. Now, obviously, how often you run the ball and how well you run the ball can sometimes go hand in hand with one another, because you don't want to keep running the ball if you're continuing to put yourself in a 2nd and 9 situation. But the success of play action is more highly correlated to your willingness to run the football rather than your ability to run the football. So run the football, even if you're struggling early in this game, because it will set up opportunities later in this game to put San Francisco away. And San Francisco, like we said, is not a team that can bring a lot of pressure. And if you're in play action a lot, that also can neutralize a lot of the pressure, because you are not putting your offensive linemen in their true pass sets, which is when I think if San Francisco is blitzing, if they're in a true pass set, San Francisco would have a little bit more of an advantage. But if you're in play action, the offensive line all kind of slides together to one side and cleans up all the mess for you. And I think in this game, you are asking Seattle to do what they've done all year, and you are asking San Francisco, in order to have success, to do what they have not done a ton of this year, which is blitzing the quarterback and getting pressure and not going to the run right away because you don't have the advantage. So I think because Seattle has a better path to playing to its identity in this game than San Francisco does, I have the Seattle Seahawks winning this 23-9. I think the pressure is going to be too much for Brock Purdy. I think Nick Emmanwori is going to be able to take Christian McCaffrey's impact out of this game. And I think Sam Darnold is able to do enough against a battered up San Francisco defense in order to get Seattle into the NFC Championship game. If the 49ers win this, though, get Robert Saleh a head coaching job right away. He's already had interviews, but if they win this again with good defensive play, then I don't care what happened with the Jets. Get Robert Saleh another head coaching job just like that, because he'll be doing it again without Jair Brown, and there was hope that Fred Warner could maybe play, or at least they had been close to designating him to return from injured reserve, but he, in yesterday's injury report, was listed as out, so that will not be the case. And then D. Winters is still questionable, so you might still have Garrett Wallow and Eric Kendricks as your two linebackers. Those are Saturday's games. Picking it up and going to Sunday. Two more on divisional weekend. The Houston Texans take on the New England Patriots at Foxborough. New England, a 3.5-point favorite. They are minus 175 on the money line. This is an interesting game. I think this one is going to be the best of the weekend, the most entertaining for all fans. And I think it is the one, for me, that is most of a toss-up. And in fact, I think the team that I am picking in this show is different from the team that I would have picked a couple of days ago after running through some of these numbers. But I am on the fence either way about which of these teams comes out of here with a victory. So Houston has had troubles on the offensive side of the football, although their defense is elite. Even this last game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they won 30-6, but the touchdowns, or at least two of the three touchdowns scored by Houston, came on defensive scores. And C.J. Stroud fumbled the ball 5 times and threw an interception. Now, he only lost 2 of those fumbles, but turned the ball over 3 times. Did not have his best game against a Steelers defense that brought a lot of pressure because Houston's offensive line and pass protection is one of the worst in the NFL. Now, Houston does have a good run-blocking offensive line, or at least a run-blocking offensive line that is not as inept as it is at pass blocking. And their on-schedule game plan to win the games during this winning streak on the offensive side of the football has been to try and limit the true pass sets that Houston goes into, and limit that by running the football effectively, going to play action, and working in the quick game. 3-step drop, 1-step drop. And I think that is what they need to do here. And I think that is really their key to success in any game, is if C.J. Stroud is able to get that ball out on the 3rd step like that and does not get forced out of the pocket. Even with Stroud having his worst game perhaps as a pro, when you look back at the film, there were still some unbelievable throws that he was making. So if he is not under pressure, he is still able to dice up the defense. And even when he is under pressure at times. But when the pressure is coming constantly, wave after wave after wave, and there's really no reprieve from it, then it turns him into a below-average league quarterback. And it turns most quarterbacks into, below-average league quarterbacks. But so far this season, C.J. Stroud has a significant gap between his play-action dropbacks and his non-play-action dropbacks. And his non-play-action dropbacks that are short throws have a much higher EPA per dropback than his non-play-action dropbacks that are deep or intermediate throws. So you want to establish that and get these drives that are more methodical going down the field. And I think for more often than not, taking points where you can get them with field goals. I would say more often than I would allow from a philosophical standpoint for most other head coaches on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2. You still want to take those chances, but I think you want to prioritize points because your offense is not always going to be able to put those long drives together, and because your defense is so good. Nickel and dime your way down the field. Take the big plays and explosives on play action when they are there, but make sure you are not getting into a 5-step drop back sort of game, 5-step or 7 steps, because that is when New England's defense is going to be able to get pressure on you. On defense, Houston has been phenomenal at rushing the passer without bringing blitzes. They have one of the higher pressure rates in the NFL, and they have the lowest blitz rate in the NFL. They just do not blitz. And in fact, really don't simulate pressures. They don't stunt. They've only simulated pressures on 0.5% of opponent dropbacks this year. So they are as vanilla as it comes schematically at rushing the passer, because Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Danico Autry, who I think did not participate, Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settle, all of those guys are so good at rushing the passer that you don't have to be anything but vanilla when trying to get pressure. However, I think a key to a successful game plan here is if Houston blitzes a little bit more. Not necessarily to get more pressure, but to blitz with some outside corners or slot corners. To blitz with guys coming off from a wide 9 set, with Danielle Hunter and or Will Anderson coming just from right off of the outside shoulder of the tackle, so that you're forcing the offensive tackle to work on the edge rusher, Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson, but then forcing the running back to try and pick up the outside pressure that is coming from, say, Jalen Petrie or Kamari Lassiter. And the reason I think that is because Drake May, when he has to step up in the pocket against pressure, has been a little bit less effective than when he is able to escape the pocket against pressure. And if you can bring an outside rusher against him that the tackle cannot pick up, then you're going to limit his ability to get over to the sideline to throw a football, to roll out horizontally parallel to the line of scrimmage, and force him back into the pocket a little bit more, where now Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson can counter some inside moves and collapse the pocket upon Drake May instead of letting him escape it and having the pressure not really matter. Because Drake May is the top quarterback, one of the only quarterbacks that has positive EPAs against pressure. And that's regardless to whether you blitz or you don't blitz. Because when you don't blitz and you get pressure, you're usually thinking, okay, well, at least I have the 7 guys back there. It has not mattered for Drake May. If you are getting pressure, if you are blitzing or not blitzing with pressure, he is still able to dissect the defense because he has an innate ability to get to the outside. So you need to bring pressure from the outside, or at least a contained pressure that kind of acts as a quarterback spy, except this quarterback spy already has an outside angle on him. So that when Petrie is coming in from a wide spot, he is either coming directly at Drake May's backside, where he can't see him on his rollout, or is coming directly to his front side, where now Drake May is not able, he does see him, but he is not able to work his way out of the pocket because of that wide rusher. So I think you blitz a little bit more often, not necessarily to create more pressure, but to use your QB contain guy as that outside rusher. And put some of that stuff. And one of the reasons for that, another reason for that is because with the younger quarterback, you're hoping that it takes him a little bit longer to read the film. Now, Drake May has been excellent at reading the field, but perhaps if you can show him some stuff that you haven't shown on film throughout the course of this season, they become a little bit more unprepared for that pass rush. And they become a little bit more unprepared for maybe if you go to more of a split field coverage, which Houston hasn't done a lot of. They mix up their coverage shells pretty well, but they have been effective at split field, but haven't utilized it a ton with a split field like cover 6, where you match up. So put a little bit more on the game plan that he has not seen. And that pressure might be able to affect him a little bit more than pressure has this season. Now going to the New England side of things. If you are New England's offense, you are finding, obviously, the ways to get Drake May out of the pocket early, regardless on if Houston brings that outside pressure or not, through play actions, through quick rollouts from the snap, because that is when he is at his best. And if he can be at his best early, you set the tone for the game. And now you're putting Houston on its heels in an environment at Foxborough that has been tough for opponents to play on historically in the playoffs. Drake May has had the experience of playing in the cold weather. I don't know what the weather is for this Sunday's game, but it's a little bit different than Houston being that dome team. And another thing you need to do if you're the New England offense is, assuming that Houston doesn't change up and doesn't listen to the Grey Duck NFL Show podcast. I'm not sure if D'Amico Ryans is a avid follower. But assuming that they just do what they have done all season and play pretty boring from a schematic standpoint, and they're going to stay within their tendencies, which I think it would be probably safe to assume, you want to take advantage of their weakest shell coverage, and that is cover 3. Now, again, they mix up all of their coverages so that they are playing them pretty evenly across. They are playing cover 1, cover 2, cover 3 at similar rates to one another. But cover 3 is when their EPA is a little bit less than stellar. So if you can get some seam shots to Stephon Diggs, to Hunter Henry, when you see that cover 3 shell in those opportune moments, knowing that Houston is not a team that likes to disguise as much, and they just straight up show you and straight up beat you with what they're showing you, then you might be able to take advantage when you see one high safety and the corners playing off, or the corners releasing deep, even if they are pressed up at the beginning of the formation. You have those seam shots ready to go and tagged into your play calls to take advantage of what Houston's only real weakness on defense has been this season, and that is in cover 3 coverage. And even then, it hasn't been a glaring weakness. It just hasn't been as good as their other coverage shells. So you want to make sure that Henry and Stephon Diggs are fed in those areas of the field, also underneath, although I think Jalen Petrie is an innate ability to take advantage of underneath throws and minimize the damage that they can do to Houston's defense. So it's mostly those seams. And probably seems, well, I was going to say away from where Jalen Petrie is, but Kalen Bullock can also rob those pretty well as well. Although assuming cover 3, you're going to have Kalen Bullock as your deep safety and Jalen Petrie as your box guy. So you can look at what side of the field Petrie is overhanging on and then just throw it seam shot opposite side. But that is what you are going to need to do. And then obviously also get Drake May, like I said, out of the pocket. And on defense, just bring the same game plan you had if you're New England that you had against Los Angeles. Well, the Chargers' offensive line was bad run blocking and bad pass blocking. Houston, as we mentioned, was at least competent run blocking, but is just as bad pass blocking. Maybe not just as bad. That's probably disrespectful to the Houston offensive line with how bad the Chargers' defensive line was. But if you blitz them, you can really take advantage of C.J. Stroud, because when he is under pressure, he just is not the same guy. And there's a big gap in who he is not under pressure, not against the blitz, and who he is when he is under pressure against the blitz. So you're just trying to ruin C.J. Stroud like he was ruined against the Steelers, and like you did against Justin Herbert. And we've already seen that game plan be effective against a similar looking team. And then you're obviously hoping that your offense is not as inept as Pittsburgh was. Because if Pittsburgh was even a little bit capable on offense in that game against Houston, they probably win that game, but they just could not get anything done. Now with Drake May, you have a quarterback that excels against pressure. Aaron Rodgers has not this season, and that can move out of the pocket a little bit more. So you're hoping that offense is able to take a little bit more of advantage of Houston's defense than the Steelers were in the wild card round. And then defensively, just go with what the Steelers did to stop Houston's offense and what you did to stop Los Angeles' offense. Because from a passing perspective, they're very similar teams. And right now, Nico Collins has not practiced this week, so you're missing your big play receiver dealing with a concussion. And while Houston does have a lot of other weapons that are good, sneakily good, with Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, and then Christian Kirk, all of a sudden coming out with a big game last week. They have other weapons that can burn you, but they don't have the ultimate weapon that can burn you, and that is Nico Collins. So you are risking a little bit less than you otherwise would be when you are blitzing. And just really force C.J. Stroud to vacate the pocket, feel the pressure, and hope that he makes more mistakes than he does good throws. And that is what I think is going to happen. And I think the New England Patriots win this game 27-24. I think it's the best game of this weekend. And I don't think that Houston will change tendencies enough to get into Drake May's head and to limit what Drake May is going to do, because we have not seen Houston change its tendencies at all this season. And I think Josh McDaniels, a seasoned offensive coordinator, is going to know exactly what to do in order to get Drake May out of the pocket and to maximize his abilities. So I have New England winning that game. Now on to the final game of the week. It is the Los Angeles Rams and the Chicago Bears on Sunday evening. The Rams, despite this game being at Soldier Field, are 4.5-point favorites. They are minus 198 on the money line. And that is because the Bears defense has really struggled against whoever it has played in both the running game and in the passing game. That first half against the Packers, Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs could do no wrong. And when they went away a little bit from the passing game at the beginning of the second half, that's when Chicago's defense was able to get some stops. But the Bears never really did figure out the Packers' passing game. Like, even though they took the lead late in that game, Green Bay was still able to get down the field and was an extra half foot of an arm length by Christian Watson away from hitting a game-winning touchdown on the play before the final fourth down play. So they were getting down the field. They were moving the ball through the air all night long against Chicago because Chicago's defense has really struggled to stop the pass. And this was with now Kyler Gordon into the game for the fourth time this season. He had only played 3 games, dealing with an injury during the regular season. He comes in and plays his 4th game of the season, and he looked like a cornerback that had not played much football this year. He had a lot of issues. Nahshon Wright, you're still kind of relying now on to be one of your top outside cornerbacks, and he's had a good year, but I don't know if I have complete trust in him when it comes to going up against Devontae Adams and or Puka Nacua. But if you are Chicago, I think the key to slowing down Los Angeles' defense is playing man a little bit more than you play zone, because they have been just that bad against zone this year. And if you are playing man, now you are not allowing Los Angeles to take advantage of your coverage rules. You are not allowing them to dictate where they want to throw the ball by, like they did against Carolina, putting a tight end solo on the outside on one side of the field that wastes your top cornerback. And then putting Puka Nacua in the backfield so that you are forcing that defense into a mismatch. If you have to play by those match coverage rules, while palms and quarters is statistically pretty effective against no matter what, if you have an offensive coordinator that knows those coverage rules and is able to exploit them as well as Sean McVay does, it doesn't matter that you're running one of the better coverages statistically in the NFL, because now they're just taking advantage of the weaknesses in those coverage and manipulating your defensive backs to be in different places and putting the wide receivers into emptier slots. So I think if you are running man coverage, at the very least, you are deciding who wins those matchups one-on-one. So I think a heavier dose of man coverage, and granted, Chicago has not been good at man coverage this year either. They have not been good at man coverage. They have not been good at zone coverage. And with some of the slowness in change of direction that the cornerbacks were playing against Green Bay, it is a risky move, but I think it is your shot to slowing down the Rams' offense. You also need to not overload your boxes, because much like San Francisco, Los Angeles has the better heavy personnel athletes and can take advantage of that in the passing game and then just ram it right down your throat. And really, it is hoping that those man one-on-ones win and that your guys are ready to go one-on-one with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, who are at least a little bit worse one-on-one against cornerbacks than they are in man coverage against linebackers and safeties, and zone coverage, where they just completely eat it up. And Matthew Stafford is able to have his way with defenses when it's just straight zone. You can't blitz. Stafford will take advantage of that. You got to make sure that you're getting pressure, and that's something that Chicago has not been able to do this season. Getting pressure with 4. Even getting pressure on blitzes. Chicago has not been able to do that a ton this year. You have got to get pressure with 4 in order to have a chance to win this game, and the numbers say that it is not likely that Chicago is able to get pressure with 4, which means it's going to be a clean pocket for Matthew Stafford to operate in, most likely, and he is able to really play regardless if you are playing man coverage or zone coverage. So that is the key to all of it. Get pressure with 4. Hopefully the position coaches are doing a lot this week in preparation to get their defensive linemen and edge rushers ready, or else it might be a long day for Chicago. On offense, it's a good Rams defense too, where their defensive line, like we mentioned earlier, is completely dominant. They have good linebackers. They have a good enough secondary. But if you are Chicago on offense, play a lot of Cole Kmet and a lot of Colston Loveland. Both of those guys have proven to be big positives in your passing game. And the Rams struggle to stop the run when they are going up against 12 personnel. They give up a positive EPA per attempt when they are going up against a 12 personnel run and a 13 personnel run. And they also struggle against the 12 personnel pass. And this would not be a normal 12 personnel pass because you have 2 very, very competent pass-catching tight ends to go along with Rome Odunze or DJ Moore, Luther Burden, all guys with Pro Bowl potential, getting run in and run out of the game in those 12 and 13 personnel sets. So I think you can put the Rams defense on their heels a little bit with that heavier personnel grouping, and that prevents some of the pressure with extra protection that the Rams are able to get, and then also gives you a numbers advantage in the run game. And you are going to need that numbers advantage in the run game in order to keep the Rams offense off of the field, and obviously to be able to do what Ben Johnson likes to do best, and that is running the ball and setting everything up off of that outside zone scheme. Like if you are able to do that and you can catch some breaks on defense, then you're able to take control of this game. However, I think the odds are that the Rams are able to take advantage of a lack of pressure from the Chicago Bears. That they are able to run the ball even more effectively than teams have against Chicago this year. with their 13 personnel, which they went away from a little bit against Carolina. And that the chances are higher that Matthew Stafford, who has been good against no pressure all year long, will still continue to be good against that no pressure in this game. You're relying on that 13 personnel and then playing everything off of that, knowing that Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are going to be able to get open even if they are the only wide receiver on the field, and even if the formation is not spread out wide so that you've got the defense spread out wide. Those guys are going to win their matchups. You don't need to worry about getting them into open space. Worry about establishing the run, tiring the Bears out early by just pushing them off the line of scrimmage and making their pass rush even less effective in the second half. For their defense, get pressure without blitzing. Caleb Williams is not good when he is facing pressure, blitzing or not blitzing, but specifically when a team is not blitzing and they're still getting pressure. And in the Rams' case, that becomes even more of an advantage for their defense because they play so much dime, which is 6 defensive backs on the field. They play dime at a 30% clip. And when we look at the numbers in the NFL that other teams play dime at, the next closest is 21% with the Baltimore Ravens. It is a defensive unit that loves to roll with its dime personnel package, and that is because they know their defensive line can get pressure with 4, meaning you are having 7 guys drop, and now 6 of those guys are defensive backs who are at their best when they're going against wide receivers. And you don't get the athletic mismatch when you have, say, Luther Burden going up against a linebacker. Now Luther Burden's going up against a really good tackling safety or a really good outside cornerback. I think they are able to get pressure with 4, whether that is Josiah Stewart, Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, Kobe Turner, Jared Verse, Byron Young. All of those 6 are going to rotate in and out of the game. They're going to be refreshed throughout the course of the game, and all of those guys have proven to be effective rushing the passer this season. And I think they are effective against the Bears, who have a good offensive line, but I think even the better offensive lines in this league are really no match for what the defensive line of the Rams bring. So I think they are able to play into their strengths, force Caleb Williams to really just be looking against a secondary that has 6 defensive backs out there, and he's on the move. I think that is when you are you're giving yourself the best shot to prevent Caleb Williams from making the magic that he was able to make against Green Bay and has been able to make all season long, late in games, happen. If you can get him on the run while not showing him any huge openings because you have those 6 defensive backs back there, he's going to take a lot more sacks. He's going to be forced to run a little bit more, and you're going to limit the Ben Johnson offensive experience, and you're going to win this game and go to the NFC Championship. I think the Rams do win this game 41-27. I think it is a game that is close in the first half, that is back and forth, that looks like it has the makings to be a classic shootout in the first half. And then I just think that the Rams are able to consistently exploit the Bears' defense in the second half more than the Bears are able to exploit the Rams' defense because of that defensive line being so talented at both rushing the passer and stopping the run. That is why I think the Los Angeles Rams win that. And based on what we have, that would put the Los Angeles Rams into the NFC title game against the Seattle Seahawks, which is something we have been looking forward to all year. They've already played 2 classic games against one another. And then in the NFC, or the AFC rather, it would be, according to these predictions, a true AFC East showdown with 2 teams that have played well against one another and have split their series in the Bills and the New England Patriots. I think both of those, really any of these matchups, regardless of who wins, will be fun. But those are my thoughts on the divisional weekend. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to another great Grey Duck Football Show episode. We hope that you have enjoyed it as much as we have. Here is the plan as we move forward going into the week. We will have 2 games on Saturday, so that means we will have an after show on Saturday, and then on Sunday we'll have an after show as well at night. So both of those should be up by Sunday morning and Monday morning, respectively, breaking down the NFC and AFC divisional games, and we'll also figure out if the coaching cycle has been updated. For now, thank you for joining us. It's been another episode of the Grey Duck NFL Show. I'm Josh Kolodziejski, wishing you a good day.